Get ready to embrace debate. First Take starts now.
Coming up on the First Take podcast, was Kevin Love injured because of a dirty play? Plus, we discuss Floyd Mayweather's history of domestic violence. And the Clippers even a series with the Spurs, so which team has the upper hand? The First Take podcast starts right now. Good Monday morning, everyone. Welcome to First Take. Carrie Champion here by myself in Bristol, Connecticut. However, never fear, the gentlemen are here as well. Stephen A. Smith is in Dallas. Skip Bayless in New York City. Good morning, gentlemen.
What's up? What's up? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
I'll let Skip go first. How are you doing, Skip?
Stephen A. Smith, will you please tell me you actually were not in San Antonio yesterday, so that game did not count? Would you please tell me that?
Nope.
Not only was I in San Antonio, Skip Bayless, I was stuck there, and for the first time in the history of this show, Kerry Champion, I don't think you know this, but I'm about to inform you of this. For the first time in the history of this show, Skip Bayless actually looks better than me because I have on the same clothes I had on yesterday because my flight got canceled. They got my luggage. I haven't had an opportunity to do anything but take a shower and brush my teeth. I'm wearing the same clothes I had on yesterday. First time in history.
Some things happen. So, Stephen A., you're saying that you're conceding that Skip Bayless looks better than you at this moment.
Only today. Listen, we've done about 300 shows together, about 400 shows together. There's a once. I mean, listen, hey, it happens. Once it's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle.
What can you say?
Carrie,
yes.
As you know and I know, just between us, it's every day.
On the show today, gentlemen, we get to the NBA playoffs in just a minute, but we're also talking about our Outside the Lines special on Floyd Mayweather and his well-documented history of domestic violence. Plus, J.R. Smith ejected from the game, and that is because he actually may or may not have intentionally threw a right hand, but we don't know. We will discuss what it means for his team in the playoffs. But first, in a very physical game, as just mentioned, the Cavs advanced to the second round after sweeping the Celtics, but Cleveland did so without Kevin Love, who dislocated his shoulder during a lockup with Kelly Olynyk. Love's status is uncertain, but he could be out as much as 2 weeks. In the locker room, he called that play Bush League, and he felt it was intentional.
I thought it was a Bush League play. I mean, I was out there. Olynyk was in a compromising position, had no chance to get the ball, and it's just too bad that he would go to those lengths to take somebody out of the game and do that to someone. So I have no doubt in my mind that he did that on purpose.
All right, so he has no doubt in his mind that he did it on purpose. Stephen A. Smith, let me ask you a question. Do you believe that it was intentional?
I don't believe that Olynyk intentionally tried to separate his shoulder. But I do believe it was a Bush League play. I don't believe he intentionally tried to cause that kind of damage to Kevin Love. I wouldn't go as far as to accuse the young man of that. But if you look at the move, Skip, I mean, it was almost like an MMA move, for crying out loud. It would have put Ronda Rousey to shame. I mean, that arm bar, I don't mean it that way. Wouldn't have put it to shame because he actually would do it much better, of course. But what Olynyk did, he wrapped both arms around Kevin Love's one arm, his left arm, and he put that maneuver on, the arm bar. So to me, when I look at it from that perspective, it was clearly the wrong kind of play to do. It is playoff basketball. It does get more physical. You understand that. Isaiah Thomas, Shaquille O'Neal, and others were absolutely right when they pointed out how this is a man's game, and these kind of things happen with the intensity of playoff basketball. Having said all of that, I still don't believe he intentionally tried to separate Kevin Love's shoulder. But the play itself was Bush League. It's not something he should have done. It was not a basketball play by any stretch. I don't care what anybody says, but I don't believe he tried to separate his shoulder.
Okay. I'll go with you on the first part. I'm going to give Kevin Love Bush League. This was a Bush League play on the part of Kelly Olynyk, who, by the way, doesn't exactly have a reputation as an NBA enforcer, which is why I will not give Kevin Love the intentional part of this equation. As you point out, they're battling for position. They're fighting for the basketball. And, yeah, Olynyk did lock on to his left arm, Kevin Love's left arm, and maybe he held it for a count or two too long. But Stephen A. Smith, you and I have covered a whole lot of playoff basketball. and in the very physical context of playoff basketball, wouldn't you agree that in the end that was mere child's play? That was a shrug and play on. That was, that was a freakish injury. Forget about Ronda Rousey. This was freakish. I still can't really believe that his shoulder was dislocated off that. It happened. I'm not discounting the injury. I'm just saying it was freakish. And Stephen A., in the bigger context of things, it was his non-shooting shoulder. So, again, for Olynyk to be thinking, I'm hanging on to his non-shooting shoulder and I'm going to try to dislocate it, is pretty far-fetched. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I definitely think it's far-fetched to accuse him of intentionally trying to dislocate Kevin Love's shoulder. I wouldn't go that far. I didn't get that impression at all, but I did think it was a Bush League play.
Okay. Well, next question.
Yeah, Olynyk told I wanted to add this for you guys. Olynyk told the Boston Herald that he did not intentionally try to hurt Kevin Love. He wishes him a speedy recovery. He actually tried to reach out to him, but he could not get a hold of him. Let's stay with the game, though, because the low-key fisticuffs continued after Kevin Love dislocated his shoulder. This time, his teammate J.R. Smith was ejected after his fist connected with Jay Crowder. Crowder was the target for most of the physical contact on Sunday. You may remember if you saw the game. J.R. Smith swinging his arm back and knocking Crowder to the floor early in the second half. Crowder remained there on the floor for a few minutes before leaving for the locker room.
I'm nervous as hell to see what could come out of this. It's a situation I put my teammates in, and it's a selfish act because I don't want anything that we do collectively to be taken away by one individual, whether it's me or anybody else.
Our David McMenamin is reporting that J.R. Smith will likely get suspended. It could be anywhere from 2 to 5 games. That's his take on it. Stephen A., what do you think the punishment should be?
You know what? When I originally saw it, it was in fast motion when I was doing Sports Center hit with Michael Wilbon yesterday courtside, Skip Bayless. And my initial response to him and to some of the NBA officials that were courtside was that, man, it'll be one game because Crowder came in the back, pushed him in the back, and JR reacted and swung, and ultimately that was it. And then I saw the replays over and over again after the game when I had an opportunity to watch it, in slow motion as opposed to in real time. But when I watched it and I saw that his fist was closed and the way that Crowder went down, this is a minimum of 3 games, Skip. It's a minimum of 3 games. I know it's playoff basketball. I know it'll be a devastating blow to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm sorry that J.R. Smith finds himself in this situation yet again because it's amazing. On one hand, you know the guy and he seems to be a really good guy, and then you hear some of the things and then you see some of the things that transpire on the court, and that's not consistent with the J.R. that's standing in front of you at a locker talking to you with microphones and cameras rolling. But in the end, this was a vicious shot. There's no question about it. And Crowder's a big boy. He's strong. He's not scared of anybody. He was ready to throw down with Kendrick Perkins. He was tussling up with LeBron James. He was completely sucker punched by J.R. Smith in this regard. There's no other way to slice it. It's a minimum of 2 to 3 games. I would say 3 games, Skip.
Yeah. You might have talked me into this one. I wrote down on my sheet 2 games. But, Stephen A., given J.R.'s track record, given the fact that Jay Crowder went down in part because of the blow and hurt his knee, and we don't know the exact outcome of that, whether it's sprained or there's some tear, but given those 2 factors, you could be right. I was trying to factor in the enormity of this playoff series that's upcoming, the enormousness of it, the Bulls, and how much JR will be missed by the Cavaliers. And so I'm thinking 2 games would have magnitude of punishment given this showdown of a series. But you could be right. It could be 3. Maybe I'm factoring in my personal view, as is yours, of JR. We've had him on the show a number of times. I like the heck out of him. I think he has a a real strong, good side to him, a smart side to him. But when you least expect it, that crazy JR side rears its head. And when you least expect it, that sort of latent knucklehead factor swimming around up there in his brain, it rears its ugly head. And when his team often needs him the most, they can trust him the least. So in this case, I like the fact that he did take responsibility. He said it was not maliciously intended, but the outcome was malicious. And even though JR said he's nervous as hell and hopes that he hasn't hurt his team too badly, you're probably right. It could verge onto that 3-game penalty, which at this time of year would seem like a 30-game penalty.
Well, you're right, Skip. And listen, I like JR a lot, but the fact of the matter is his actions on the court, particularly in pivotal situations, meaning playoff games, are simply not consistent with the J.R. Smith that we run across on many, many occasions. He's always incredibly nice and respectful to me. I see the way that he is a lot of times with the media, and I applaud the way that he conducts himself with them, and he's to be commended for that. But that does not offset what he did yesterday. It doesn't offset the fact that yet again he put himself and his organization in a dicey situation because of a knuckleheaded moment where he was unable to control his behavior. And Crowder's a big boy, like I said. For him to go down like that, and then you see it again in real motion when you're really, really paying attention, and you see his head snap and him go down. Do you know how stunning and painful a blow it must be for you to fall down to the point where you hurt your leg with the fall because your body just drops and it collapses? That's what happened to him because he got sucker punched. There's no other way to slice it. He got sucker punched by J.R. Smith. And knowing the rules of the NBA as it pertains to today's brand of basketball, knowing how much of a heavy hand the NBA brings down upon guys who do this stuff, even for shoves, for crying out loud, to put himself in this situation and LeBron and the crew in a situation where they could end up playing a game without his services in the next series is just egregious. And it's not going to be just a game. Because if I know the NBA office, just seeing Crowder's head snap the way that it did, you can take the leg injury out of the equation, and it would be an automatic 2 games. But then when you take into account the potentiality of a leg injury that he may have sustained, okay, and then JR's history of finding himself in these precarious situations, I think it's a minimum of 3 games, and I think he'll be lucky if the NBA doesn't hand down 5 games.
All right, well, presumably the Bulls will win the series over the Bucks, and the Cavs will be waiting, again, presumably. But what if there is no Kevin Love, and perhaps, as just discussed, no J.R. Smith, suspended for a game or 2 or perhaps more? So, Stephen A., let's look ahead. How will this impact the potential series between Chicago and Cleveland?
If Kevin Love is not available and J.R. Smith, dare we say, let's speculate, Skip, for a moment, and say he's suspended for 5 games, or if the NBA comes down and says you're suspended for the entire Eastern Conference semifinals, the Cleveland Cavaliers are officially in trouble. I'm not going to definitively say as of yet that they would lose this series, but I probably would end up saying that. I don't think LeBron, as great as he is, beats the Chicago Bulls without J.R. Smith and Kevin Love. Unless Kyrie Irving goes berserk, of course, which is always possible. But if Kevin Love and J.R. Smith can't go for the entire series, then the Bulls definitely should be the favorites to beat the Cavaliers in the next series.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but without knowing exactly how long either of these players will be gone, I'm going to go on record as saying I still believe the Cavaliers could win the first 2 games. I'm still going to, these, again, home games, and I'll tell you why, Stephen A. Again, you remind me of this often. We're still talking about LeBron James, the best player on the planet. And there are nights when I think Kyrie Irving is the 2nd best player on the planet. Now, that brings me to the third member of the Big Three. And I'm going to go on record with this one also, Stephen A. Again, we're talking about Kevin Love's non-shooting shoulder. I think he could do himself a lot of good, depending on how bad this is, and I don't know. I always tell you, the hardest thing for me to do on this show is to talk about another man's injuries because I don't know what his pain threshold is or what he's feeling. I don't know what the doctors are exactly going to find when they MRI this. But I think it's possible he could try to go with this with some sort of brace on his left shoulder. I think he could do himself a world of good if he would at least try to go a little bit, just in presence only for this team, because I'll bet you a lot of those guys you discussed, the Shaquille O'Neals, the Isaiah Thomases, the greats who were talking about this last night, I think they thought that not only was this injury from a child's play type situation, I think they thought that Kevin Love was a little childish, making such a big deal out about how this was intentional. It's time to suck it up and try to win one for the Gipper here for the Cavaliers. Now, they could use Tristan Thompson, obviously, to rebound the way Kevin Love rebounds, but obviously Tristan Thompson cannot shoot. So they're going to have to look down the bench. They're going to have to use a James Jones. They're going to have to use some of those mothball players, Mike Miller down the bench, Sean Marion down the bench, and hope that on guts and guile they could get through a couple of games. Now, I don't know if you're right about JR being gone for 5 games. I don't know, because he is a big stage, big shot maker, and that's a huge loss for this team. But again, Kevin Love can win a lot of votes. His stock could go up with the Cleveland fandom and with the national media if he will suck it up and try to go as best he can with some kind of brace on his shoulder.
Well, listen, let me say this. Kevin Love, you make a very, very accurate point, because that's the impression I got from listening to Isaiah and Shaq and those boys about how Kevin Love reacted, calling it intentional or whatever the case may be. You're right about that. I definitely got that impression. But I think that when you look at Chicago, their size, their physicality, the way they come after you, along with the way that Derrick Rose has played. Now, granted, he blew Game 4, but I believe he'll make amends for it. That happens to great players. We understand it. I think that he'll make amends for it. In the end, you look at their depth, their physicality, their size, their defensive prowess. As great as LeBron and Kyrie are, and it's usually 2 of the 3, that's all that's needed. I give you that. But if we're talking about Kevin Love and J.R. Smith missing a few games, you still go with the Cavs. If you're talking about J.R. and Kevin Love missing an entire series, I can't bet my money on the Cavs without those 2. I can't do that.
Well, that is fair. So now we wait for the outcome of both of these, which are going to have huge impact on this series.
The Los Angeles Clippers answered their worst loss in playoff history with a convincing victory. Chris Paul had 34 points, 7 assists. Blake Griffin, 20 points, 19 rebounds. And the Clippers beat the Spurs 114-105 on Sunday to even their first-round series to 2 games apiece. The Clippers bounced back from that 100-73 loss in Game 3. And now they host Game 5 on Tuesday.
The series switches back to L.A. Tied 2-2. You've got home court advantage back. Who has the momentum now?
Nobody. It's 2-2. That team there, it doesn't matter if they play at home or on the road. They're going to play the same way. So we got to get our rest and be ready for another dogfight on Tuesday.
All right, so games 3 and 4. Let's recap. Skip Bayless, were there any surprises?
Stephen A. Smith, I'm going to ask you to give me just a couple of minutes here to vent and soul search, because I got to admit to you, I was really shook up by what I witnessed yesterday afternoon in San Antonio. You were there. I was on my couch. Then I was on my floor. Then I ran to the bedroom. I tried everything I could to change the momentum. Nothing would happen. Nothing would switch. I don't think in all my years, Stephen A., of closely following my San Antonio Spurs, that I've been more shook up over 2 straight playoff games, because I was shook up over what happened Friday night. I didn't see that coming. The big 3 of, as you know, Tim and Tony and Manu, combined to score the fewest points together they ever have, 12 total points Parker with 6, Duncan with 4, and Manu with just 2. And my Spurs still blew out the Clippers, blew them out on Friday night with this clinical, surgical offense that sliced and diced LeBron's team in the finals last year, and brilliant switching defense on Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, the likes of which I haven't really seen much this year. And I thought, wow, it's going to be okay. The sun's actually going to come up tomorrow. So yesterday, I thought the Spurs had a chance to go in and right the wrong of what happened in the final regular season game, which was, as we all remember, they blew a game at New Orleans, and they fell from the 2nd seed all the way to the 6th seed. And I thought yesterday, okay, here you go. Golden opportunity to all but bury the Los Angeles Clippers and move on to the Houston Rockets. And what happened? Shockingly again, my Spurs took their foot off the gas. They thought they could actually coast past the #1 offense in the NBA. And my Spurs, they just didn't want that game nearly as badly as the Clippers wanted it, and they gave up 114 points at home. They got shot out of their own gymnasium by the Los Angeles Clippers yesterday because Chris Paul, and I have been hard on him on this show, played the best playoff game I have ever seen him play. He was possessed yesterday, showed up 3 hours early to practice that mid-range jump shot against Sam Cassell, and he hit it and hit it and hit it again. And I love Austin Rivers. I thought New Orleans made a good pick of Austin Rivers, but finally that young man gave his father a bench that he has not had much of this year. Way to go, Austin Rivers, but thank you for killing my San Antonio Spurs. You actually did a Patty Mills on the Spurs yesterday, Austin Rivers. So, Stephen A., I look at this and I say, my Spurs played the dumbest playoff game I think I have ever seen them play. On defense, as Pop said, we were not wise on defense. We lost focus. They were lost. They continued to switch and lose shooters for wide open shots. On offense, they just played dumb all day. Manu missed a big layup when they had a chance to seize control late in the 3rd quarter. Patty Mills, my guy, missed a wide open 3 that could have put them up 4. And then they just collapsed in chaos. It was an absolute fiasco. My Spurs cannot stand prosperity. They have to do it the hardest way possible. And here we go again with now 2 out of 3 left at the Clippers. I'm going to hang in. I said Spurs by 7, and I'm going to cling to that barely. But I must admit to you, I don't really trust this team much anymore, Stephen A.
I don't blame you for not trusting them. It's hard to trust them right now, considering the situation that they now find themselves in, where they'll have to go back and win at least another game in Los Angeles in order to win this series. I get where you're coming from, but I think you're giving more credit to their lack of a performance than to what the Clippers did yesterday. So let's analyze that. Number one, you got Blake Griffin, who showed up and grabbed 19 rebounds. Number 2, you got Austin Rivers, who came off the bench. A sensational performance for this young man in 17 minutes to do what he did for his father and for the Clippers organization, because you had people on this team questioning what he could do offensively and whether or not he was ready and whether or not he was the ideal backup to Chris Paul in that lineup at the point guard spot. They know that he's been exceptional defensively, and that's been his primary objective. But offensively, you were waiting for something like this, and he stepped up and delivered in a must-win situation. Glenn Big Baby Davis only attempted 2 shots, Skip Bayless, but his minutes were pivotal. Why? Because with left in the 3rd quarter, late in the 3rd quarter, DeAndre Jordan, after missing 2 free throws, one being an air ball, clearly with Popovich hell-bent on implementing the Hacker Jordan philosophy, Doc Rivers yanked DeAndre Jordan from the game, put Big Baby Davis in there, if for no other reason, to just lean on Tim Duncan. And sure enough, it ultimately helped. So that was another guy outside of Jamal Crawford and Austin Rivers that came off the bench and did something for you. So instead of the Clippers being 6 deep, yesterday they ended up being 8 deep. And then we get to the greatness of Chris Paul. Arriving 3 hours early, speaking to him before the game. I was there. I had to do the Sports Center hits, as I'm sure you well know, Skip. Chris Paul was possessed. His own son was sitting there saying, "Daddy, you played bad." The wife was like, are you okay? You didn't seem all right. I don't know that, Chris Paul. 7 points, just 6 turnovers. Who the hell was that? That wasn't my husband. And this is, his dad was courtside, sitting right on the baseline with his brother. And obviously Steve Ballmer, the $2 billion man, or the man who paid $2 billion for the Los Angeles Clippers, was sitting right next to them. And they were all looking at Chris Paul like, excuse me, you know what you need to do. You know what you've got to do. And Chris Paul totally embraced that responsibility and showed up and played like a superstar point guard is supposed to play in this kind of pivotal moment. Taking on the toughest defensive assignment, obviously being aggressive offensively, having to run the show with Doc Rivers, who I spoke to before the game, repeatedly imploring him to be more aggressive, to take control, to understand that whether you like it or not, you are the man for this team. He accepted it and went out there and flat out balled. And because of it, this series is tied 2-2, and the Clippers are in control of this series if they handle their business Tuesday night. But the pressure is still immense because just like they couldn't lose yesterday, otherwise this series was over, chances are they can't lose Tuesday. Otherwise, they'll find themselves in a very, very precarious position. Even though if the San Antonio Spurs do win Tuesday, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Clippers turned around and won in Game 6.
If memory serves, Stephen A. Smith picked Spurs in 6.
That's right.
Are you going to amend that prediction at this moment?
No.
Really?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay, so you are now still seeing the Spurs winning Game 5 and coming home to win Game 6.
David Robertson was talking to myself and Mike Wilbon after the game, Skip, and he said, quote, if they could play like that and shoot that way and be that unstoppable offensively, we've got no shot. But how many teams do that repeatedly? I need to see it again.
Okay, and all I'm hanging on to is I still got Hack of Jordan in my back pocket. Maybe Pop has to resort to that sooner in Game 5. I've still got the fact that Danny Green went 0 for 6 from 3 yesterday, and I still am hanging on to the fact that Tony Parker still cannot find enough lift to make any jump shots outside the lane. He's made 2 15-footers in 4 games. And, he can be as lethal as Chris Paul is shooting mid-range jump shots for the Spurs. Well, I'm going to have all that swing completely the other way. And Ginobili's going to have to pull his head out and start making plays instead of turnovers. So, I don't know. I don't love it, but I'm going to hang on to Spurs in 7.
Skip, can I help you out with your Spurs? Something that I noticed that I might want to enlighten you about? Huh?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes. Here's the deal. You know how I like to sit around and watch guys shoot around pre-game. That tells me a lot sometimes. I watched the San Antonio Spurs before the game last night, and Tim Duncan was grabbing rebounds and throwing them to Danny Green. And you know how I feel about Danny. I love him. But he was playing around. Yep. He was playing around, launching shots, and he was missing more shots than he usually does because he wasn't locked in and zeroed in and as focused as I know him to be. Now, that might be totally unfair to him because you're just playing around, shooting around, warming up before the game. But when you are missing the way that he has been missing, being the sharpshooter that he is, you've got to lock in. You've got to, I'm talking about just strictly in warm-ups. You got to be all business and start get your form right, your rhythm right. You got to be about the business of making sure you get yourself in order. I didn't sense that before the game yesterday, and I didn't want to make too much of it. But then when I saw he didn't make another shot for yet another game this series, it's what entered my mind. So I thought I'd let you know that.
Right. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's significant. And I remind our viewers, Danny Green has the finals record for three-point makes against LeBron's team, as we know, 2 years back. And Stephen A., I'm just watching TV, but when I saw a shot of my Spurs just before tip-off over on their sideline, they were yucking it up. They were loosey-goosey. They were joking around. as if we got this. And when you're up against the bulldog that can be Chris Paul, you don't got this. Chris Paul was on a mission to right all the wrongs that he has caused for his team. And in one afternoon, he did. He put them back, I think, into commanding position because my Spurs did not take yesterday seriously enough, starting, as you say, with Danny Green.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Consider this comparison for a moment. Dallas Cowboys defensive end Greg Hardy has been suspended 10 games without pay by the NFL for his role in a domestic violence case that was ultimately dismissed by the court. Compare that treatment to that of boxer Floyd Mayweather, who has been convicted not once, but 5 times in domestic battery cases or assault cases involving 4 different women. Mayweather has even done jail time, but he's never faced any suspension by boxing officials. As his mega fight with Manny Pacquiao approaches, in a piece that first ran Friday afternoon, John Barr of Outside the Lines examines Mayweather's troubling past.
In your case, there's been actual convictions, and no governing body has ever suspended you or sanctioned you. What message do you think that sends victims of domestic violence?
I say I want everybody to tune in May 2nd. Mayweather versus Pacquiao. This is a fight that you can't miss.
You have no desire to answer that question?
I'm blessed to be where I'm at. You know, I have 4 beautiful children, and I'm truly blessed to be where I'm at today. And with hard work and dedication, you can be anywhere in life.
Well, look, unquestionably, you've worked hard to get to where you are, but there are a lot of people who wonder why you should be allowed to continue to box in the highest profile events when you've got the track record that you have, when in other sports there have been serious repercussions for some of these athletes.
Well, you know, when it's all said and done, only God can judge you. But I don't want people to miss this fight. This is an unbelievable matchup. Mayweather Pacquiao, May 2nd. Be there.
As John Barr mentioned, he has worked hard to get to where he is, but once again, in my view, Mayweather refuses to answer the question and is completely dismissive when he is asked about his history of domestic violence. Skip Bayless, your reaction.
Stephen A., my reaction, and Carrie, my first reaction was, once again, this was an extremely thorough and enlightening and ultimately troubling story done by Outside the Lines. But, Stephen A., I can't go so far as to condemn the Nevada State Athletic Commission for sanctioning this fight, for licensing Floyd Mayweather Jr. Obviously, this fight is going to bring in huge money to the economy of Las Vegas, Nevada. And in Floyd's defense, he did do his time. He served 2 months in 2012, and since his release, he has been allowed to fight 4 times at the very site that we will be at for our shows, and then obviously for the fight on Saturday night, the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And just for the record and for perspective, as you know, Stephen A., Mike Tyson, convicted of rape, served 3 years in prison, and then was licensed to fight 16 more times after his release, and 7 of those were in Las Vegas, just for perspective. In John Barr's piece, the great Thomas Hauser, brilliant boxing writer who did the definitive Ali bio in the early 90s, says that the media has given Floyd a pass. And I will agree with that. That is very true, Stephen A. Smith. I look at this, and as much as I have told you I am not a fan of Floyd Mayweather Jr., the person, as many times as I said that on the show, even I am shocked because I had lost sight of the scope and depth of Floyd's history of domestic violence. 7 instances of alleged physical assault against 5 women that resulted in arrests or citations, and as Kerry pointed out, 5 convictions. That's quite a history, which led Bob Lee on Outside the Lines to call Floyd a serial abuser who flaunts his long history of domestic violence when he is asked about it. Which leads me to my biggest problem here. Floyd will show no remorse publicly. He will show zero contrition. He will assume zero guilt when asked about his long history of domestic violence. Stephen A., he could make this week so much more palatable if he would just so much as to say he was sorry for his past actions, that he did serve his time, he paid his price, but he's sorry. If he would just say that, but apparently he doesn't feel that way, and frankly, it makes me feel a little sorry for Floyd. Your response?
Well, my response to that is, first of all, when I saw the piece, obviously you look at that situation, I certainly wasn't aware of all of those facts. Any of us should be appalled. As far as I'm concerned, any decent man or woman should speak emphatically against domestic violence, and the fact that he finds himself in this situation is egregious and reprehensible, and it's disgusting. And as far as I'm concerned, again, if there's truth to all of that, he's lucky he only got 2 months. He should have been in there. He should have been in jail longer. When I've asked Floyd about things that I've heard face to face, on camera, off camera, he's emphatically and categorically denied it. Even went so far as to say, you know something, if I could be honest and straightforward and speak truth, maybe I would speak on the issue. But because I can't do so, you know, it is what it is. And then you stop from there. But in terms of Nevada State Athletic Commission, let's be clear about this. If we're going to be real and honest, and because for me personally, one of the reasons why I'm disgusted about these topics from time to time is because I feel like we can't be totally honest about everything that's going on. We're pointing the finger at the Nevada State Athletic Commission. We all understand that money speaks and that money rules, and that when you are in a situation where you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. We know exactly why Floyd Mayweather Jr. was allowed to have 4 more fights after being incarcerated in Las Vegas, because they see an opportunity to get money. We're not trying to cast any aspersions on Mike Tyson, because his day has been, you know, he's done his time. He's paid his debt to society, like you pointed out, 3 years. But he is a convicted rapist. In the aftermath of all of that, what happened, Skip? Not just 16 fights, okay, but last time I checked, he was a star on Broadway. So we look at it from whether it's the Nevada State Athletic Commission, whether it's Broadway, Hollywood, or beyond. There's a whole bunch of people who could be accused of sharing, extending a blind eye and a deaf ear to these kind of things. It's clearly something that the NFL has been accused of, whether it be Ray Rice or beyond. The fact is, the National Organization for Women, along with a bevy of other folks and organizations, pointed out how there was a dereliction of duty on the part of the National Football League. So this has been an ongoing issue that has permeated and sullied our society for far too long. More attention is being brought to it now more than ever before. It's right that it is occurring, but at the same time that we're saying this, as a show, as a network, where are we going to be this week? Where's HBO going to be this week? Where's Showtime going to be this week? Where are all the sports fans going to be looking at? They're about to charge going from $49 or $59 to anywhere from $90 to $99 for pay-per-view, and they're still expecting this to exceed all-time records as it pertains to sales. Why? Because despite the issues that have clearly and deservedly so, according to the report, having sullied Floyd Mayweather, you've got folks out there who want to see the fight. Just like they wanted to see Tyson versus Lewis, Tyson versus Holyfield, and the list goes on and on. People still want to see what they want to see. Why? Because you can complain and draw attention to these issues that affect Floyd Mayweather, just like it affected Mike Tyson. But in the end, once the court of law has dealt with them in whatever way they choose, we ultimately get back to why they're relevant in the first place. They're relevant because as fighters, they're great, and people want to see them, whether it's seeing them win or seeing them get knocked out. That's the reality of the world that we're living in, and we all need to just grow up and own up to that reality, because they could never be who they are in terms of how they affect us as a society if we didn't allow it collectively to happen. But we seem to do that in America and then turn around and wonder why others do it as well. I don't understand that.
I hear what you're saying. Obviously, boxing is different from the National Football League because boxing, Floyd Mayweather Jr. in particular, is not governed by a league. He's not sanctioned by one commissioner of one league. He can fight in Las Vegas and Nevada. He can fight in New York, and it's all different. But I hope that post-Ray Rice, because we have all opened our eyes, that maybe boxing can open its eyes going forward and start to look in the mirror. Remember, Floyd was denied a visa back in February because he wanted to go do a promotion, do a tour in Australia, and they said, no, you can't leave this country because of your history of domestic violence. So maybe boxing should take a cue there. I agree, this is all about huge money and huge interest. But at some point, you need to step back and say, should we continue to help clean up our sport the way the commissioner of the National Football League finally saw fit to clean up his sport? I would hope that would happen going forward.
But where we part ways on that, Skip Bayless, is that I'm not going to put more of a responsibility on the Nevada State Athletic Commission, Boxing Commission rather, than I would put on Joe Public, the rest of us. If we weren't standing up and supporting, the fight the way that we clearly are, then they wouldn't do it. If we didn't do that with Tyson, then they wouldn't do it. If we didn't do it with the NFL, then they would not do it. The fact is that a lot of this stuff has happened because the industries themselves, whether it's the National Football League, whether it's the Nevada State Athletic Commission, whether the list just goes on and on. When you have a growing public that's sitting there and they salivate towards your product and towards your brand and what you bring to the table, and they don't particularly care in terms of it getting in the way of them seeing what they want to see, then what are they supposed to do? Hollywood does the same thing. To me, I look at it, and it's just like stuff that goes on in the inner city community. We can point to the way a lot of folks act and the way that they conduct themselves, but when it's glorified in Hollywood, when it's glorified in the music industry and beyond, and people are getting paid, what do you expect to happen? Because it's being fed by somebody. If they sat there and put their foot down, then it would be nothing to cheer for. But y'all want to look at Joe Public and just throw that aside? I can't do that. We're all a part of it. We're all a part, and myself included. I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of it.
All right, gentlemen.
Yeah, me too. I think we've all been a little hypocritical here.
There's quarterback on quarterback crime in Philly. Mark Sanchez was asked about Tim Tebow on the roster, and here's what he told CSN Philly. He's obviously a great guy. He works hard, and we need another guy to throw while Sam's still recovering. So that's the reason for the signing, at least as explained to me. We're excited about the upcoming year, and I think we have a great group. All right, so he's just there while Sam's recovering, according to Mark Sanchez. Skip Bayless, what do you make of these comments?
Stephen A. Smith, I'm going to preempt your bad, lame Tebow joke before you make it. I'm going to ask, how can you bring in a guy just to throw who can't throw? Okay, now, on to the question. As I reported in my ESPN.com column of last week, I was told that when Mark Sanchez got wind of Chip Kelly bringing in Tim Tebow, he went to Chip Kelly and begged him to please don't do this to me again. Obviously, when Tim Tebow came to the Jets, he turned Mark Sanchez's, Mark was a starter obviously then, turned his life into a living hell in New York through that ill-fated season they spent together. And maybe it's just possible that Chip Kelly tried to placate Mark Sanchez by saying, hey, we just need another camp arm until Sam gets healthy. I don't think that's what's going on. Obviously, it was very different that year in New York because Rex Ryan misled Tim Tebow into thinking he was actually going to get to compete 50-50 for Mark Sanchez's job, when in fact, he just brought in Tebow as a curiosity, as a sideshow, not so much to help win games, but to help win back page headlines from the rival New York Football Giants. This is going to be different. I believe, because I've been told, Chip Kelly is going to give Tim Tebow a chance to compete for some playing time. I don't know if it's just on two-point conversions, or if it's on short yardage, or if ultimately he will get a chance to prove he can throw. He has fixed his mechanics, and that he could compete for the starting job. But all I know for sure is that Mark Sanchez did not distinguish himself when he got to be the starter for the Eagles last year, witnessed the late season collapse. Obviously, he stunk it up at Green Bay, then against Seattle, then against my Cowboys, then even at the Redskins. So I'm not sure what Mark has to talk about. And if he's feeling threatened, he probably should feel threatened by Tim Tebow this time.
Well, he's coming across as feeling threatened, Skip Bayless. He's coming across as somebody that's a bit worried because he feels the need to comment about Tim Tebow, which I think was relatively foolish on his part. Having said all of that, you do make valid points because, again, for somebody who can't throw, you're bringing him in to throw while Sam Bradford is not healthy.
Okay, I give it to you.
That sounds a bit odd. That does sound a bit odd. But you know what? I think that Mark Sanchez has a lot to worry about because Mark Sanchez, even though he's had some good moments, he's also had some stinkers. And he's proven to be a model of inconsistency, and more importantly, somebody who comes across as a bit insecure, specifically when it comes to Tim Tebow. Now, in fairness to Mark Sanchez, Skip, however, I can't blame him because considering how Tebow was sabotaged, if you want to talk about sabotage, who was more sabotaged than Mark Sanchez for what he had to deal with in New York the last few years there? What he was subjected to wasn't any fair. It wasn't fair either. So in that regard, I can understand a heightened level of sensitivity. I just think he needs to be mindful of the fact that he's in the National Football League. He's a quarterback. He once was a starter. Now he's a backup who had several starts last year once Nick Foles went down. And if you want to be a leader of men, you've got to be a man yourself. And you can't be somebody that's coming across as a bit boyish because you're so insecure about somebody coming up the rear.
Yep, I'm with you. And for Mark, although he said, as Kerry pointed out, some very good things about Tebow, to be that dismissive was a little beneath Mark Sanchez, unless he's having really thin skin here and really starting to get paranoid by the new Tim Tebow, or about the new Tim Tebow. And go ahead.
In fairness to Mark, on this point, you can develop thin skin when the media is getting on your last damn nerves. Asking one question after another, after another.
Okay.
So that could factor into the equation, too.
Okay. All I'm here to say is the first little shot has been fired between these two. Not that Tim is going to fire any shots back. But let's suffice to say here, even though Tim isn't one to hate anybody, I don't think he loves Mark Sanchez, nor vice versa, and it builds another layer of soap opera underneath an upcoming training camp that will make the Eagles the most fascinating team in pro football. Just to watch the dynamic between those two, then depending on what Bradford's health is, depending on whether they bring in, who knows, I don't know if he's going to try to land Marcus Mariota or not. It's just going to be fascinating for us to watch because now there is a little bit of percolating bad blood here started by Sanchez versus Tebow.
You know, he's a part of the Big Three, and he's been playing exceptionally well in the postseason, so we'll see, going on this week how he feels, and hopefully it's not as bad as we all think. And, but if not, someone has to step up. We got guys that have to step up, and we can't have any excuses.
If the Cavs have to go without Kevin Love and J.R. Smith, it will be bad news for the Cavs. The Cavaliers were pretty efficient with both Love and Smith on the floor during the regular season. And over 1,000 minutes on the floor together, Love and Smith helped the Cavs outscore their opponents by about 9 points per 100 possessions. That's much higher than the Cavs' overall season average of 4 points. So here's the question. How much pressure is on LeBron moving forward if he doesn't have Love and Smith in the upcoming series? Stephen A.
Actually, I think it gives LeBron a break, psychologically, believe it or not, because the expectations for a championship were elevated once the arrival of Timothy Mozgov along with Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith took place. Prior to that, you had a lot of people that were looking at the Chicago Bulls, saying they'll come out of the East. You had a lot of people looking at the San Antonio Spurs or the Golden State Warriors, saying they will win the championship. But the moment that LeBron James watched Kevin Love's left shoulder get separated, J.R. Smith get ejected, and knowing the likelihood that both of them could be out, if they are gone for a lengthy period of time, with the Chicago Bulls still having Derrick Rose in the lineup, having acquired Pau Gasol, still having Joakim Noah, Todd Gibson, Mike Dunleavy Jr., Aaron Brooks, Jimmy Butler having elevated himself to all-star status, Tom Thibodeau still coaching and being exceptional at that, there is no denying that the Chicago Bulls, fully loaded, is better than a Cleveland Cavaliers team that's shorthanded. So that's what this comes down to. If you're LeBron James, now everybody harkens back to how you said it's going to take some time. We're going to have to gel. This is when he first arrived, and he talked about how you're not guaranteeing a ring because we got to make sure we can gel with one another and that we have the pieces in place. We elevated that stuff once David Griffin went about the business of acquiring those other dudes. If two of those three are gone, I'm sorry, not two of the three, but just Kevin Love and J.R. Smith, that has a lot to do with potentially impeding Cleveland's success. And I think that helps LeBron because I think to some degree he'd be playing with house money. Not necessarily literally house money because he is a superstar and the best player in the world, but to some degree with a little bit of house money that he didn't have when both of those guys were in the lineup and healthy.
Wow. You surprised and impressed me with that answer. I did not see that coming. You went second-level psychology on me, and I think you make a deep and valid point. I had not thought of it that way, that this could take some pressure off, as in extend the honeymoon a little bit here, because you've got to give LeBron a break. He's got new pieces. He lost some. I get all that. But I'm going to hang in and say what I said at the top of this show. You always remind me, Stephen A. Smith, that LeBron James is still the best player on the planet, right? Are we still there?
Yes, he is.
Best player on the planet. Okay.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we both agree on given nights, Kyrie plays like the second best player on the planet. And what a joy it has been for LeBron to have that guy riding shotgun for him on given nights, like that night at San Antonio when he scored, 57 points. They won the game in overtime.
Yep.
So when you have that kind of firepower with your best player and your 1A player, and I got to say, I watched all the 4 games against Boston, and even though I dismissed it, we both picked a sweep. As you said, Boston hung in, made some plays, made some shots, made them sweat a little bit, turned yesterday into an almost too physical closeout matchup. But, Stephen A., I was extremely impressed with the way LeBron played in those 4 games. He was extremely physical. He took the ball to the basket consistently. Jay Crowder is no joke, as you pointed out to me. He is a physical young man. He's got an NBA body. And he banged and pushed and you know, he fought with LeBron. He fought tooth and nail in a legal way to try to keep him from the basket, and he could not. So my point is, if LeBron keeps playing that physical brand of basketball, I know Gasol is long and tall. I know Joakim is long and tall, but they're not physical terrors. Sometimes Taj Gibson can be. But my point is, do they really have an answer to a LeBron who's playing as possessed as, say, Chris Paul did yesterday against my Spurs? I don't think so. So I'm saying that LeBron shouldn't get a pass here. Maybe he has a little bit of a built-in new excuse, but he's got Mozgov. He's got Tristan Thompson, who's been a sort of a sixth man, who's going to have to play more minutes, obviously, if Kevin Love can't. But I still think that it's not like LeBron goes into this unarmed, quote-unquote. I think he's still got a lot of firepower around him, including his own body. Go ahead.
Nobody's questioning the firepower that he has around him because Kyrie Irving is enough firepower. Remember, in the game of basketball, if you have 2 elite scorers, you can beat anybody on any given night. We understand that. But what you have to take into account, Skip, is the fact that in J.R. Smith and Kevin Love, you're losing 2 of your 3 top perimeter players. And as a result, that means that outside of Kyrie Irving, along with LeBron and his occasional threes. You've got to go to the hole and beat someone else playing big boy basketball. And I'm telling you that LeBron, I don't want to use the word pass, but the level of expectation that normally would come attached to him since J.R. Smith arrived and has been in that lineup with a Kevin Love. It would be one thing if you lost just one of them, because then you still have three guys. But to lose both of them puts everything on LeBron and Kyrie. And remember that Kyrie is just 22 years old. So because he's 22 years old, in his first playoffs of his career, even though we know his skills are big time and the boy is on another level and the handle is just nasty and all of this other stuff, he's still just 22. And this is his first playoff series. So you combine that with the absence of Love, the absence of J.R. Smith potentially. You're basically left LeBron standing alone against Chicago. If this were Washington, if this were Atlanta, Skip, you're absolutely right. But because Chicago is next, in all likelihood, the fact is that he bought himself that mulligan. Or their injuries, rather. The injury and the ejection bought LeBron that mulligan.
Okay, but one of LeBron's favorite players back from his Miami days is James Jones. I know James was 0 for 6 from 3 yesterday. I know he's an aging player. But when he gets in a rhythm, and we both watched him before games make like 80 straight threes, he can shoot it. So could he be a fill-in? Could he be a stand-in three-point shooter that they need at this point?
Skip. He can be a fill-in. Mike Miller can be a fill-in. Sean Marion can come off the bench, not as a shooter, but as an athletic defender, whatever. He could be a fill-in. We're not talking about that. We're talking about LeBron without Love and JR potentially going up against Chicago. Could they pull it off? Sure. Do we expect him to be LeBron and possibly pull it off? Yes. But the expectations have been, it would be significantly lowered if Love and JR are both not available for the Chicago series. That's all I'm saying, nothing else.
So is our conclusion that LeBron now has a built-in excuse?
Our conclusion is the expectations would be significantly lowered without Love and JR against Chicago. That's the conclusion. I mean, am I not speaking English? That's the conclusion.
I'm speaking English back to you, and my English is saying my bar is still way up here for LeBron James.
And I'm saying my bar is not.
Because he is the best player on the planet.
And I'm saying my bar is not against Chicago.
We go again. Yeah.
Okay, are we done, gentlemen?
Again, no, a last quick point, Gary.
Okay.
One last point. Even though Derrick Rose has been pretty good, he hasn't been great. So you can't say that he is completely back. He obviously dribbled into a late turnover trying to do too much the other night in Milwaukee. And then he lost.
Brain lock.
My man, Jared Bayless. He's one of the best players in the league because of his last name. Don't ever forget his last name. And he made a sweet move, and our man Jared Dudley made a sweet pass for the game winner. But again, maybe he's not quite there, and LeBron is still the best player on the planet, Kerry champion.
ESPN Radio, bringing you directly to the biggest events in sports.
Center field, well hit, Hunter back, out of here!
From opening day of baseball,
throw to the plate, safe at the plate,
right through the World Series.
For the third time in 5 seasons, the San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
Whether it's LeBron, Chris Paul, or Kevin Durant, when the NBA tips off, ESPN Radio is right there when a champion is crowned.
We have a new world champion. The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
And when the magic of bowl season arrives, ESPN Radio is your home for the new college football playoff.
The college football playoff first national champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
The biggest events in sports can be found right here on ESPN Radio.
The TMZ Sports spoke with George Foreman on Friday, and Foreman was asked about Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s place in boxing history. This is what he had to say. Pound for pound, Floyd is better than me and Muhammad Ali ever were. This is a better generation by far. They're smarter, they're stronger, they're overall just better fighters. We were good, and we liked the attention that we got, but boxing is on a different level. This is an amazing generation. Skip, Stephen A. This is an amazing generation. Do you agree with him? Skip, you want to go first? Or you want to give to Stephen A?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Stephen A. This is nothing but pure sour grapes. This is nothing but George Foreman having an axe to grind. For our younger viewers, just a reminder, George Foreman got rope-a-doped by Muhammad Ali. When we all thought that Ali was actually in trouble of losing his life in the ring, he rope-a-doped the unbeatable monster that was George Foreman for 8 rounds. He wore him out, and he finally knocked him out. And I believe he wrecked George Foreman's psyche and ultimately derailed his heavyweight career, and I don't think George ever quite got over that. So obviously, he is not objective here. If he wants to make the case that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is the greatest pound-for-pound defensive fighter, I will give you that case. But my case back to you, Stephen A., is that when I look down Floyd's resume, the first real test he's ever going to have, to me, is at age 38, and it will be Manny Pacquiao this Saturday night in Las Vegas. I look at this and I say, Muhammad Ali, in his time, that time that George Foreman discounted, fought the great Sonny Liston twice. He fought the great Joe Frazier 3 times. He fought a pretty good, if not great, Ken Norton twice. And obviously he beat George Foreman. So those were real heavyweights in every sense of the word. Those were all good to great fighters. And I look down Floyd's resume and I say, where's the knockout power? Where's the punching power? Except for that one fairly recent sucker punch knockout, I have to look all the way back to Justin Juco on May 22nd, 1999. That's almost 16 years ago for the last real knockout of Floyd's career. And then you're going to tell me he's the greatest ever pound for pound? I am not buying it because it is straight sour grapes.
Well, I'm not going to go as far as that because I don't want to disrespect George Foreman. He went through a lot himself because you remember the whole documentary and even in the movie played by Will Smith. By the way, he did a sensational job with that Ali movie. By the way, when they were in, they were in Zaire and they were talking about Ali Boumaier, Ali, kill him. You know, they say that George Foreman at the time was sitting there talking to these folks, going about saying essentially, what's wrong with these people? I'm black too. And so what happens is that when your psyche is damaged, Ali would torture a lot of souls, man, because you had even, in terms of just being black, you had people who were black who were so strongly for Ali. Black folks who were fighting Ali were treated as if they weren't even black, for crying out loud, just because they were going up against Ali. And that's one of the things that a lot of guys, especially a Joe Frazier, is known for being incredibly bitter about, because Ali was so insulting to them or what have you. He is the greatest, but psychologically, he would just demoralize you. And it's possible that may have happened with George Foreman. Having said all of that, I do think that Floyd is arguably the best ever defensively. But the best ever, period, no. I'm definitely going to put Ali up there before him. I'm definitely going to put Sugar Ray Robinson up there before him. I'm going to lean on my old friend, Skip. You know him very well. You knew him, God rest and bless his wonderful soul, the one and only Bert Sugar, who used to educate me on the sport of boxing. Every chance he get would just bless me with one nugget of knowledge after another every single time I saw him. He was just a wonderful man to me. And I'm just telling you, he talked about Floyd. He respected the hell out of Floyd. But when you look at the Alis, the Sugar Ray Robinsons, people like that, Joe Lewis's of the world, when Joe Lewis knocked out Max Schmeling in 1938, for crying out loud. Just the list goes on and on. So many of the things that these guys had to go through, and to have a level of greatness that can't be rivaled, that can't be knocked off or diminished. Considering those times that they had to display that level of greatness and the pressure they were under to do it at the time they were asked to do it, I don't think you can minimize that. And as much as I love Floyd Mayweather's defensive prowess as a boxer, because he's absolutely a magician, and there's something to be said about the modern-day athlete and its superiority, I hear where Floyd is coming from when he thinks he's better than Ali. He thinks he was better than Sugar Ray Robinson, even though he gave them their respect. But I can't give him an edge over those guys. He knows that. I've never been able to.
So, digging a little deeper here, do you think George Foreman is still bitter over the way he got treated in Zaire before the fight?
Well, I think that it still hurts him. I don't want to use the word bitter. I think it hurts him.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately what psychologically damaged him is that assisted in him coming after Ali that much harder. And the fact that Ali was able to rope-a-dope him, take that punishment, whisper in his ear, "Is that all you got, George? Is that all you got?" He knows that he was psychologically maneuvered and hoodwinked. And I think that's what eats away at him to this very day. I think George Foreman knows if he was able to conserve his energy and not punched himself out, that he might have been able to beat Ali. When Ali dropped him and he fell like a tree trunk, remember, the primary reason he couldn't get up was not because he was hurt. It was because he was exhausted.
Yeah, he's exhausted. Yeah, he was. Okay, so in the big picture, do you think that Foreman is saying that today's Klitschko could have been a dominant heavyweight in the Ali era?
No.
Because that's where he's going with this. He's saying they're bigger, stronger, faster today.
Well, that's a very good point, because I don't think there's anywhere on earth that George would acknowledge that. Now, Vitaly, even though he's not as good, nearly as good of a boxer as Vladimir, he's got an iron chin. Vladimir has been caught, and he's dropped like a house of cards. So I think Vladimir, he's so big, he would have an advantage. But if, let's say, for example, one of the old school guys was in his weight class, literally towards his weight, they weighed almost as much. A Foreman, for example, I think a Foreman would have beat Vladimir. I think an Ali would have beaten Vladimir. I think those kind of guys would have beat him. Yes, I do.
Well, the Redskins have until May 3rd, but according to NFL.com, they are more than likely to pick up RG3's fifth-year option for 2016. The option will pay him $16.1 million. He's due to make a little over $3 million this season. In 3 seasons with the Redskins, RG3 is 14-21, 40 touchdown passes, 23 interceptions. Stephen A., are you surprised by the fact that they're picking up his option, $16.1 million?
I'm absolutely not surprised. I am utterly and totally shocked. I can't believe it. Listen, I support RG3. I wish him nothing but the best. I root for him because I think he's taking an entirely bad rap. I think people have looked for every excuse to condemn this kid. He's made some mistakes in terms of focusing on his brand as much as he was focusing on football, and he didn't need to do that. But as I'm sure we have learned, based on the discussions that we have had, this guy is not a bad dude. He doesn't get in trouble. He hasn't committed any crimes or anything like that. It's just a difference of opinion. And you would think, based on how people talk about him sometimes, that he did all of those things. And I think it's grossly unfair. Having said all of that, there is no way in hell I would have picked up this option on RG3 because he hasn't proven to me that he's worthy of it yet. His rookie year, he performed. He went 9-6. We get that as a starter. The last 2 years, he was 3-10, and then this past season, he was 2-5. That is a 5-20 record as a starting quarterback in the NFL. That is winning 25% of your games. And I am going to pick up a $16 million option on you Not even for next season when you get a chance to prove yourself and make amends. But this option is for the 2016 season. That means the season beyond next season. This is shocking. It makes no sense. I'm happy for him because I love to see the brothers get their money. But Daniel Snyder, this is kind of, it's an idiotic move. That's just it. It's an idiotic move. It doesn't make any sense because I need to see what RG3, and I believe he will do well next year, Skip, but I need to see it. I need to see that he can play with for Gruden. I need to see that Gruden doesn't mind that he's not your quintessential prototypical drop-back passer. I need to make sure that Gruden isn't salivating for his own Andy Dalton via Colt McCoy or somebody else, or Kirk Cousins. I need to see that to believe that in order for RG3 to excel at Washington. And there's no proof that I'm going to see that. So why would I pick up a $16 million option for him for 2 seasons from now? It's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Not only do I not think this is an idiotic move, I think it's a brilliant move on the part of Dan Snyder. And I'm going to suspect he was behind this move, if not driving this move. You say there's no way in hell you would have picked up this option, and I say there are 16.1 million reasons in heaven I would have picked it up. I'm here to say that RG3 has not once been healthy the last 2 years. I couldn't recognize him because I don't think he could trust his legs. We know about the knee injury. We know about the ankle injury. I'm going to say that Dan Snyder believes that for the first time since RG3's rookie year, he will be 100% healthy going into this July's training camp and hopefully into next season. And if Jay Gruden can't get on board with this, then Stephen A., Jay Gruden needs to move along to his next job because he was hired, he was commissioned to click with RG3. And I, for one, am sick and tired of the public pot shots that Jay Gruden has constantly taken at his injured quarterback, RG3. And I'm going to remind everybody.
We agree there.
It's not like, okay, but RG3, it's not like he didn't prove anything in the National Football League. All I know is, as a rookie starter in the NFL for the Washington Redskins, he threw 20 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. He led a team to the NFC East title, and he led a team to a 14-0 lead against Seattle in a home playoff game before he got hurt. At least he tweaked his knee, and then we know what happened later in that game when he wrecked his knee. So don't tell me that he hasn't proven he can do it at an extremely high level, offensive rookie of the year level. So let him get healthy. Let him get comfortable with a coach or vice versa. It's up to Jay Gruden to figure out how to click with RG3 now. How do you replace RG3? It's not with Kirk Cousins or Colt McCoy. I'm sorry. He's a stud, he's a star, and he will return to that level.
Skip, they have the number 5 overall pick in the NFL draft. There are a bevy of ways they could do it. That's number 1. Number 2, I am in no way advocating that Colt McCoy or, Kirk Cousins should be his replacement. Number 3, I completely and totally agree with you on Gruden. He's got to handle his business. He was there because of his credentials as a quarterback coach. Whatever his issues are, you're supposed to fix it. No excuses. He's the one that should be under the microscope. I totally get that. But you're also asking me to ignore the last 2 years and rely strictly upon an injury-free rookie season in which RG3 balled in order to pay him $16 million more 2 years from now. Not this season coming up, the next one. That's my problem. I'm like, why can't I see what he does first? And if I don't pick up the option, that's fine. He's free to go elsewhere. Well, RG3, if you produce in the nation's capital, I'm Daniel Snyder, the billionaire. I'll make sure I re-up you. You have the freedom to go elsewhere. But if he has such a close relationship with Daniel Snyder, why should the Redskins have to commit beyond next season? Why can't they wait and see what he brings them before they commit to him long-term or picking up the $16 million option? I think that stands to reason. I think this is not a business decision at all. This is personal because Daniel Snyder loves his boy some RG3. I get it. I appreciate it. Most of us would love to be in that kind of position. But from a business perspective, if you are a Washington Redskins fan, this move tells you we're clearly not going after a quarterback in this upcoming NFL draft, which means as a result, what we're going to do is buffer and build everything else, but our season is still reliant upon the services of RG3, just like it has been the last 2 years when he's going 5-20 as a starter. RG3, the person, I'm in complete support of. I've told him that. But I've also said I'm going to hold you accountable for what I see on the field. And what I have seen on the field over the last 2 years hasn't been much. Period.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If I told you right now the Redskins could land Marcus Mariota or have RG3, which way would you go? Mariota or RG3? Right here, right now.
I would say to you, I would probably go Mariota, not because he's a better quarterback, Skip, because number one, he's healthy, and number two, he's cheaper. So if you're healthy and you're cheaper,
okay,
I'm going to go that route.
And I'm here to tell you that would be an idiotic decision. I don't think Marcus Mariota is going to be instant great. RG3 was instant great in this league. Okay? So, look, Daniel Snyder, it might be that he's got sort of this pet feeling for RG3 and he coddles him, blah, blah, blah. He also, I believe, saw greatness in RG3 on an NFL field. And I applaud Dan Snyder for having the guts to stick with it and not jump ship before RG3 could get completely healthy.
But my hesitancy is twofold, Skip. Threefold, actually. I know Mariota can't touch RG3. I'm not comparing them skill-wise. What I'm saying is, number one, I don't know how healthy RG3 is going to be. Number two, I don't know what bridges have been burned in Washington because I'm not completely sold on that whole locker room culture, camaraderie, chemistry thing that we've been looking for that hasn't been in existence there over the last 2 years. And then last but not least, Jay Gruden. Jay Gruden, the chemistry overall, which in part may be due to the perceived relationship between Daniel Snyder and RG3, which is more than a perception, by the way, when you consider this latest news scheduled to come down the pike, combined with RG3's help. That just tells me that even though I think RG3 is going to be big time, I think he may be better served somewhere else than in Chocolate City, the nation's capital. That's my personal opinion. Now, obviously, if he gets healthy, he can do some things. And Mariota's not better than him, but I'm looking at the obstacles that have been self-inflicted to some degree. And I don't know how easy it is to overcome that. And I'm not going to invest $16 million 2 years from now when I don't even know what you're going to do next season.
Okay, I agree. Some of the obstacles were self-inflicted, no doubt about that. But what did we hear from Ryan Clark the last time he sat with us at the debate desk? Ryan Clark became a leader of that Washington Redskins team last year. He told us he would bet going forward on RG3.
I don't care.
I said, thank you for saying that, and you disagreed.
You want me to tell you why I disagree?
I'm taking Ryan Clark to my bank.
You want me to tell you why I'm not taking Ryan Clark? You want me to tell you why I think you're foolish for taking Ryan Clark to the bank? And why I will not take our boy Ryan Clark to the bank on this one? Because he's not in that locker room any longer. If he were in that locker room, I'm sold. Because he's got the kind of personality that can squash all of that noise. But without him there anymore, I ask you a question, Skip Bayless. Who's the leader of the Washington Redskins right now? Take your time. I'll wait.
Robert Griffin III.
Thank you. And that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because right now, we don't know what level of respect and deference they're willing to give him. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm a fan of RG3's, just like you are. I know the brother can ball when healthy. I know he's got skills. And I also believe him to be a really decent and good person who's been railroaded in certain respects in terms of his character.
Yes.
But with all of that being said, the fact is that he's 5-20 over his last 25 starts. as a quarterback in the NFL. Who you leading with that record? Who? Who you gonna lead?
Okay. But a leader in the locker room last year, Ryan Clark, knows the troubled dynamic of that locker room. And even knowing that, even though Ryan won't be there to try to mend some fences for RG3, he said he would take him to the bank. I'm taking that to the bank. I'm sorry. That was a big deal for Ryan to say that, because Ryan can be honest to a fault. And if he were not sold on RG3, he would indicate that in little or big ways.
Nobody's questioning the honesty of Ryan Clark. I know he's an honest guy. He's an honorable guy. I genuinely like him. Happy and proud to have him as a part of the network. Ain't nobody knocking Ryan Clark here. I'm simply saying that doesn't make him flawless. He could be wrong. And I think that what Ryan Clark heard and what Ryan Clark saw was because Ryan Clark was in that locker room, and if you had acted up, you were going to have to deal with him. Now, you might have guys that are bigger and stronger that could sit up there and try to slap Ryan Clark upside his head, but Ryan Clark will hit him back. And more importantly, when you get beyond the juvenile physicality stuff, then you've got to deal with the cerebral individual that he is, as a player rep as well, who's highly intelligent, and they know that, and as a result, they're not only are they not going to mess with Ryan Clark, they're not going to mess around Ryan Clark. But now that he's gone from that locker room, I'm not sure it's going to be the same. It's the Redskins we talk about here, with Daniel Snyder as the owner. Come on now. You going to rely on that? Please.
I'm going to rely on that because Dan Snyder, he just repositioned his football team to compete for an NFC East championship.
No,
that's what just happened.
We'll see. Hopefully so. Hopefully. But don't act like you know, coming off a 5-20 record over the last 25 starts. We don't know.
Dudley up top. Open. It's got a clean catch. Jared Bayless sprung free under the basket, and he will send this to a Game 5. Bayless delivers when it counts.
Bayless delivers when it counts. Interesting, huh? I hear someone chuckling in the background. After defeating the Bulls in the final seconds on Saturday to avoid the sweep, the Bucks look to force a Game 6 back in Milwaukee. The Bulls have clinched one playoff series on home court in the post-Jordan era. Will they be able to close it out tonight? Bayless, your namesake, he delivers when it counts. Your take.
Bayless always delivers when it counts, Stephen A. Smith. And by the way, before I answer Kerry's question, it's going to be a great sports week for guys named Bayless. Obviously, my man Kenny Bayless is going to referee the fight in Vegas on Saturday night. And I know, Kenny, you're going to at least give Manny a fair shake. Jared Bayless, my man, won that game. I think he's going to have a big game tonight in Chicago. And then, obviously, Team Bayless, as in my San Antonio Spurs, that you just never know what they might do in Game 5. Maybe they'll shock us again. Who knows? But back to tonight, I do believe the Bulls will close it out. I think Derrick Rose had to shake off a little more rust when he messed up on the turnover, when he tried to do too much to win the game on one end. Then he lost my man Jared Bayless on the other end. No big deal. They'll bounce back. They almost have to win tonight to sort of keep on chronological pace with the rival Cleveland Cavaliers. So I think Derrick Rose will bounce back. I think it'll be tough, but I think it will go to the wire for a Bulls victory.
I'm sitting here looking, sounding, and feeling a bit exasperated, Skip Bayless, because I realize, based on your opening soliloquy, that I'm going to hear the word Bayless practically every day this week. And it's just a disgusting thought, to be quite honest with you. But I'll manage. In the end, here's what it comes down to. The series will end tonight. Jason Kidd has done a phenomenal job with the Milwaukee Bucks, but they're not winning this series. They will lose in Chicago because Derrick Rose will make amends for not one but two pivotal mistakes that cost them Game 4. And oh, by the way, Joakim Noah, who I like a lot, he needs to show up, and he will, energized by that home crowd. Listen, they were a minus 24 with Joakim Noah on the floor in Game 4. That can't happen. That can't happen. They got to be better than that. And so he knows it. He'll step up. Taj Gibson will step up. Derrick Rose will definitely step up. And Jimmy Butler. Boy, I can't wait till free agency. This brother deserves his money. Give him his money. He has shown up, and he deserves that 33 points in Game 4. He has shown up. Give the man his money. So all of that being said, I think that they know the Cavaliers are waiting. They can't prolong this. Chicago won't play any games. This will be their most lopsided victory of the series. They closed the deal in Game 5.
Really? Wow. So you think they're going to blow out the Bucks?
Yeah.
I don't, because as you've pointed out to me all season long, these Bucks are no joke. O.J. Mayo the other night was no joke. Chris Middleton is no joke, making clutch shots. And Antetokounmpo, the Greek freak, I can't say his name. Antetokounmpo. He is no joke. And I think with sort of nothing to lose, I think they match up pretty well with the Bulls. I think the Bulls are going to get pushed and tested tonight, and Derrick Rose is going to have to play a few more minutes and push his knees a little bit harder to get through on this one.
Okay. All right. You can dig that all you want to.
All right.
It ends tonight.
Stephen A., as we close out quickly, who has the edge, Spurs or Clippers?
Right now, the Clippers, based on their performance, they're going back on their home court. They definitely have an edge, but the pressure is also on them, because if they lose tonight, if they lose Game 5, they lose Game 6 in San Antonio.
I can't believe you're still hanging in with your Spurs in 6 prediction. But I love it. I hope you're not doing it just to jinx my Spurs. But I'm with you. I think the Clippers have earned the edge so far.
I will say this. I'm not going to be offended if the Clippers end up meeting Houston in the next round.
You're not going to be offended if we have to go to L.A. That's
Yeah.
what he's trying to say. Meantime, in between time, again, we're on the road for the fight. We will be at the MGM Grand Pool Complex Wednesday, April 29th through Friday, May 1st. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can catch First Take Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on ESPN2. And don't forget, starting Wednesday, we're live in Las Vegas for Fight Week. We're at the MGM Grand Pool Complex. Doors open at 5:30 a.m. We'll see you there.